Are we live? Are we live? Hello everyone, welcome again to another mini harp lesson in my mini harp lesson series every Friday at 11 a.m. And today's topic is going to be prevention of blisters. I'll join you, I'll talk to you in a second. I just need to check what's happening on Instagram. Life has ended before it even started. And not share this card. Let me try again with the Instagram because I know that there are people watching on Instagram as well. Go live again. Checking connection. Hello Instagram. Sorry for the false start earlier. 2 minutes after the time. Sorry about that. Let me know if you can hear me. Let me know if you are with me. And just for those who haven't heard me on Instagram, today's topic is going to be blisters, and to be precise, avoiding getting them in the first place, and if they happen, what to do, how to deal with them, and how to go back to playing as soon as you can. The reason why this topic is today is because it turns out it's one of the most popular on my blog. It was a really short blog post where I'm just sharing 2 tips of advice, but from the statistics I can see that it's one of the first one that people go to when they come into my blog. If you go follow the link on the profile for the Instagram and for my website, you will be taken straight away to the blog, so you will see that article and all the other posts, including all the lives. And I thought, because that post was quite basic, that I will develop on that and talk a bit more about this, because of course I have students who come for advice when they have a blister. And actually, when I was doing research for that live today, just checking some English terminology and so on, I stumbled upon my own post from how many years ago, just trying to do quick maths, 15 years ago, when I was not playing even for 1 year, and I didn't know at that time what was the correct English word for a blister. And I went to some English speaking musicians forums and tried to ask for some advice how to prevent that. And it was interesting to read these replies. You could see that the forum was not harp specific, that there were musicians giving advice from their perspective. And I saw a reply from someone who said that probably something is wrong with my technique, that I'm getting blisters. So I wanted to ensure all new harpists, it's nothing to do with your technique. Blisters are, unfortunately, for most people, part of life of a harpist. We will all probably get them at some point. We will try, and I try very hard with my students to ensure that they don't get them, and I will say more and how. But for most harpists, unfortunately, sooner or later, through one way or another, we will experience that firsthand. Anyway, let's move on to preventing blisters, and maybe I just say that this will probably not be much of interest to harpists who play other types of harps. I mean, harps where you don't use your fingertip to play, people who use fingernails, or I don't know if there's anything else you can use, but basically this life is for people who play either pedal harp or lever harp or any other type of harp where you use your fingertips, the skin on your fingertips. And the best thing to prevent blisters from happening in the first place is practicing regularly. So even if you can't do more than 10 minutes, try to do this. Even if you're quite tired at the end of the day, just try doing maybe a short warm-up. I was doing a live on warm-up a week ago, so if you're in need of inspiration, you can have a look at that and download the PDF. Even doing that will help you to get the skin of your hands, get this very thin layer of callus, which is hardened skin, that will prevent blisters from happening in the future. If you can, try to split your sessions. So instead of doing, let's say, half an hour per day, try to do 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening. If you can, maybe try doing even 3 short sessions. But it's much better to do a shorter amount of practice, smaller amount of practice, than practice until you get a blister. Definitely not recommended. Especially if you're stressed, try to take lots of breaks, and even more, try to split the sessions. I know that many of my younger students have time to do some practice before they go to school. some practice just after you come from school, just touching the harp, maybe just tuning the harp, that will also help, and then some in the evening before you go to bed. I mentioned stress. For me, I find that when I'm preparing for a performance or when I'm just stressed, I get blisters much more easily. It might be something with the tension in the body, with plucking the string slightly differently, but I know that when I'm stressed, I need to be even more careful, and sometimes I even put a timer on just to divide practice into a small manageable time slots, 10 minutes practice, 10 minutes of, I don't know, writing pedals, trying to memorize the music away from the page, mental practice, things like that. So splitting practice sessions is definitely the way to help you with that. Be careful, but especially careful when you're on holiday, coming back from holiday, and you didn't have your harp with you, because I think it takes about 2 weeks. If you have calluses, 2 and 3 weeks, your calluses will be gone if you don't touch the harp. With a week, it's kind of okay, but still try to be careful, and even more so, limit your practice at first to 10 minutes at once, and just monitor your skin. Any funny feeling, you might not even see the blister coming up, but you will just have this slightly uncomfortable feeling, and that's the sign to stop. Regarding holidays and practicing on holidays, I remember seeing something called practice harp. I think it was made in Hong Kong, and I think you can buy it from Hong Kong. It was a small wooden frame with strings on, which didn't make much of the sound, but it was more for getting the grip on the strings, and I think it costed something like £50 the harp itself, but of course shipping from Hong Kong might compensate for that. Another place where I saw practice harp available was Nibishen Tree. I have to say I haven't tried any of these instruments. I've got my own small harp, which I was hoping would be the instrument that I could use as practice instrument, but I'm afraid it doesn't fit Ryanair luggage requirements, so I haven't tried it so far. But that's why I'm telling you about all these other harps that I've seen. So Nibish and Tree also have some form of practice harp, and I think theirs is foldable. You can detune the strings and put everything together into a small piece of two wooden sticks joined together. But I think that one is quite significantly more expensive, 300 something pounds, I think. As I said, I haven't tried any of this, so I won't be putting links, but you can easily Google them and try it out if you are thinking that you might be going away for more than 2-3 weeks. That might be one way to keep your fingers in shape. And one more thing that I have tried, and I would definitely recommend, especially if you're doing some orchestral work or you're playing pieces with lots of glissandi, is getting felt picks. They are very small, about that size, pieces of solid felt, which you can use to play glissandis instead of your fingers, because playing lots of glissandis will definitely generate blisters if you're not careful. So if you don't have glissandis and the conductor is asking you to play up, try to reason with them, saying that you will play softer in the rehearsal to play more in the concert, just to save your fingers. And that's a very typical practice used by brass players. They have to save their lips, actually, and most of the conductors understand that. So if you say that you have to play softer now so you will be able to play louder in the concert, that should solve the problems if you haven't got your practice, your felt picks with you. I'll put a link to this one because I'm very happy with them and can definitely recommend those, and they were not too expensive, and it's a very good investment because they last really, really long. I've bought my first pack and haven't gone through, none of them have any signs of damage. Moving on, other things apart from practicing regularly that you can do, be quite careful what you do with your hands. How do you take care of your hands? If you wash your hands before practice, try to allow 5 to 10 minutes for your fingers to become completely dry. The reason for that is that the skin on our whole body, not only fingers and hands, is covered in a thin layer of lipids, which is supposed to protect our skin from bacteria and some micro harms done to our skin. And with water, and especially with a soap, you're removing all sorts of fatty, greasy lipid layers. So your fingers are very prone to harm if you remove that from them. So I would advise wait for 5 to 10 minutes after washing them. Or if you don't have to, don't wash them at all, to be honest. Unless you've just been to the toilet or unless you've been playing outside with some dirt, then just approach the harp as you are. And there is no really good way to clean the harp strings, so probably your hands will be still a tiny bit cleaner than your harp strings, but at least they will stay protected. Then when you're doing something which involves more soap, more water for a longer period of time, such as taking a shower, taking a bath, swimming, doing the dishes, I would advise waiting at least 20-30 minutes. Might be a bit better, even 30 minutes, because then that takes even longer for the fingers to rebuild that protective layer. So if your fingers are very soft, wrinkled, red, definitely don't play the harp just yet. Use that time to plan your practice, to revise what you've been doing recently. If you've been memorizing something, try to revise those beats that you've memorized. You can do lots of things apart from playing. You don't have to play straight away. Sometimes we're very impatient to start playing. We feel that, we haven't played all day, we have to play now. But there are many more things which actually can be much more efficient than being with your instrument that you can do in addition to that. Then water and things like that. Moving on to nails, something I was talking about briefly in the Insta story earlier. I'm sure many of you heard at the beginning that you need to keep your nails short to play the harp. This is unless you play the type of the harp that requires use of the nails. But as opposed to other instruments, for example, piano, we can't trim them too short. I remember when I was playing piano, I played piano for 7 years before moving on to the harp. I noticed that my fingernails had to be really, really short in order not to make the sound on the keyboard. However, with the harp, if I trimmed my fingernails to that level, so the fingertip was quite exposed, and I noticed that there were many more blisters happening just on the point where your fingernail is touching your fingertip. And I think for a harpist, you should probably leave a tiny bit more of the fingernail in order to protect that bit of the fingertip, because we very often play with just the very top of the finger. Sometimes it's sort of more that side, closer to that edge of the fingernail. But if you have them too short, that means that you are prone to get blisters, especially the nasty type, which is just on the edge of the fingernail and the fingertip, and there's not much you can do about those. I wouldn't risk poking them or doing anything if part of the blister is under the fingernail. Oh, well, if anyone is too sensitive, you may want to cover your ears in any of those more touchy points. I'll try to warn you in advance if I'm talking about anything too drastic. I hope there won't be too much about that, but anyway. So fingernails not too short, and I would recommend not to have the change of the length too drastic. So cutting fingernails with the scissors is something which will change their length quite significantly, because you can't quite cut just 0.5 millimeter or so. It's quite hard. So what I do, I use a file for the nails, something like that, just showing to Instagram as well, and I try to file my nails every 3 or 4 days, because that's about how much it takes for them to grow just a little bit. So they are more or less the same length every time. Quite important when filing them. I try to do that not just before playing, and that would be the same with cutting. If you prefer to stick to clipper or scissors, it's best to do that much earlier before playing. Probably doing that in the evening. If you wanted to take a bath, you could have taken your bath and then file them, so they are not in the bath getting softer just after they have been shortened. And another thing you can do in the evening, when you have filed your nails, taken your bath, shower or whatever, you can apply some hand cream on your hands, because that's something which you can't really do during the day when you're playing. It will make your hands quite slippery. I personally really don't like that feeling of having anything on my hands during the day. But applying some hand cream for the night will be really helpful to replenish any of that protective lipid layer that you might have lost during the day. And to keep that, keep the whole hand warm and keep that cream working over the night, I use some cotton gloves. I think they are not too expensive, but if you haven't got them and you can't find them, another thing you can use is a loose cotton sock. Nothing too tight. You want your hands not to be how to say that, you don't want your hands movement to be obstructed during the night. The blood flow needs to be there, so a very loose cotton sock will also do the job if you're applying hand cream for the night. And from there, moving on to the blisters, when they appear, what to happen when you feel that there might be blister coming any minute now, or when you have a blister. That's where the hand cream will be really helpful as well, because it keeps your hands moisturized. And I noticed that, especially if it's a very small blister that it's just about to come up, if I put that hand cream and gloves for the night, sometimes it disappears in the morning, the skin gets harder, the liquid goes away. Sometimes it can almost prevent the blister which would be about to arise from happening. Then when some people say, I heard an advice from a harpist who I think haven't had many blisters herself, but she said, oh, just do some dishes, help your mom doing some dishes. It didn't quite work for me, soaking hands with blisters. I think it just made them even more prone to injuries. So of course it's fine to do a little bit. It's not like you have to avoid swimming pool or shower or anything like that, but I wouldn't try soaking your fingers on purpose as a method to get rid of blisters. I would try to moisturize your hands first. And then if you don't absolutely have to, I would probably avoid playing with the finger that is affected by a blister. I would try to give it a bit of rest. Play with your other hand, especially if it's your left hand. That's a really, really good thing, because most of the time we know the right hand line really well, not so much the left hand line. So if your left hand is blister free, then you're in for a very, very good and productive practice session. Mental practice, as I said before, memorizing, tapping the rhythms. That's something you can do with both hands, even if you haven't got a blister. Left hand tapping the rhythm of left hand, right hand tapping the rhythm of the right hand. Memorizing, just looking at the page of music. You can also listen to some recordings, read about the composers, about the pieces. There are plenty of things you can do while you're waiting for your blister to heal. And then here comes the warning. There's a drastic part. If you don't want to hear about what else can be done with the blisters involving needles and stuff, switch away now. Tune in maybe in about 5 minutes. If the blister is in a really awkward spot and you're really desperate to play, something that I do is poking them with a sterile needle. You can sterilize it with rubbing alcohol, and then I try to gently poke the blister, in order not to break the skin which is underneath the blister. So just a tiny bit, just so there is a tiny hole to release the liquid from inside. I can see the number of viewers went down on Facebook. I'm sorry if there are sensitive souls out there. Sorry, we will be done with that soon. Just a little bit to let the liquid come out, so the skin is again quite flat. Don't get rid of the skin, keep it there, because it's your natural bandage from your own skin, so keep it there. If you are not going to play immediately, you can apply some antibiotic ointment. And if you are going to play, I would put a plaster on the skin, but not the kind of plaster made of rubber and with some band-aid on it, but a kind of very thin paper plaster that I was showing earlier in my Facebook stories. Just trying to find the beginning of that plaster. You can see that that one is quite fresh. So this is basically just some paper with some glue on it. It's very thin. It's something like that, just maybe a bit thicker than a piece of paper. I think in the UK you can find it under the name Leukopor. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I will write it down in the description of the live, or Micropore. In Poland, that's something called Polopor, Viscoplast, showing to Instagram, showing to Facebook. You can definitely order it online, and then I'm going to tear it slightly at the top, in half, like that, tear it slightly at the bottom, and let's pretend I've got a blister. I had a blister on my thumb. I will try to put it so the center of blister is roughly where I would be playing the harp, and then one side would go here, then here. Try not to have it too tight. It needs to be rather tight so it doesn't come off while you play, but not so tight that it obstructs your blood flow. And there it is. The sound won't be amazing, of course, and it might leave a bit of a sticky residue on your strings, so I wouldn't overdo it unless you really have to, but it will help you to be able to move your fingers a little bit while the skin underneath is protected and can heal. I heard about some other recommendations from other harpists that I haven't tried in person, but I can tell you that I was told that witch hazel cream works quite well. Also, I heard about surgical liquid, but because I haven't tried it myself, I'm not going to say anything more. These things that I just said were the ways that I do deal with blisters. One last thing, if you notice that the liquid coming from your blister, again, drastic things, switch yourself off if you don't want to hear terrible medical stories, Dr. House style stories, but if you notice that the liquid which is coming out of your blister is not clear, I mean it's white, not transparent, might be yellow, might be green, I have never seen that in my life, but this is definitely a sign that something is very bad is happening. You probably had your finger infected and you need to see the doctor. Normally, blisters are not something you would see a GP. If you want, you can go to a pharmacist. They might be able to advise you about antibiotic ointment and things like that. But if you notice these strange colors, or if you have a red and swollen bit of skin around the blister, then that's a sign that you should see a doctor. Sometimes some blisters will have a bit of blood inside. They will be quite bright red, and you will be able to tell that it's blood, nothing else. This is also fine, but I would be. This is also fine, and you should be fine without seeing the doctor. But I wouldn't poke your blister with a needle if that happens. But if it gets quite hot, the blister when you touch it, much hotter than skin around, then that's another sign that inflammation came in, and you need to go and see someone to help you with this. Okay, I wonder if anyone has any questions. I won't be playing the harp today because, again, as I said, the best thing to do if you have a blister is stop and do some mental practice, memorizing. I'm wondering if people would like to hear about mental practice, because that's another topic that I think is very useful and probably not quite explained enough when we come to our teacher for lessons. We're usually playing, and that's usually what happens with my students. Most of the people somehow figure out how to do mental practice on their own. So let me know if you would like to hear a bit more about this. And next week I will be on again at the same time. This time I will be playing. Even though I'm away from the harp today, I will use all the tips that I said about and will hopefully not have any blisters. Yeah, have a very nice weekend and hope to see you next week. Bye!